The phone call came at 3:47 in the morning. Bumpy Johnson was awake. He was always awake. Sleep was a luxury for men who did not have enemies, and Bumpy Johnson had more enemies than he could count. He picked up the receiver, said nothing, just listened. The voice on the other end was familiar. It belonged to one of his men, a lookout stationed outside the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. "They got him, boss. Malcolm is down. Multiple shots. It does not look good." Bumpy closed his eyes. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned white. For a long moment, he did not speak. He did not breathe. He just stood there in his apartment in Harlem, feeling something he had not felt in decades. Helplessness. He had promised to protect Malcolm X. He had given his word. And now Malcolm was dying on the floor of a ballroom, and Bumpy Johnson was 15 blocks away, unable to do a single thing about it. February 21st, 1965. The day that changed America. The day that Malcolm X was assassinated in front of 400 people, including his pregnant wife and 4 daughters. The day that Bumpy Johnson learned that even the Godfather of Harlem could not stop a bullet he did not see coming. But this story does not begin with death. It begins with a promise made in a Harlem restaurant 6 months earlier, a promise between a gangster and a revolutionary, a promise that would bind 2 of the most dangerous men in New York together until the very end. This is the untold story of Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X, the story they do not teach in schools, the story that explains why the most feared gangster in Harlem became the bodyguard of the most feared voice in America, and the story of what Bumpy did after Malcolm died. A revenge so quiet, so patient, so devastating that most people do not even know it happened. August 1964, 6 months before the assassination. Malcolm X walked into Wells' restaurant on 7th Avenue. It was a Harlem institution. Soul food and secrets, the kind of place where deals were made and debts were settled. Malcolm was alone. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just a tall man in glasses with a target on his back the size of Manhattan. He had just left the Nation of Islam. He had just called out Elijah Muhammad for his affairs with young secretaries. He had just become the most wanted man in Black America, not by the police, by his own people. The nation had put out the word. Malcolm X was a traitor. Malcolm X was dead man walking. Anyone who helped him was an enemy. Bumpy Johnson was sitting in the back booth. He watched Malcolm walk in. He watched how Malcolm scanned the room before sitting down. He watched how Malcolm kept his back to the wall and his eyes on the door, the habits of a man who expected to die soon. Bumpy stood up and walked over. "You should not be here alone, brother Malcolm." Malcolm looked up at him. There was no fear in his eyes, just exhaustion, just acceptance. "I should not be anywhere alone, Mr. Johnson, but the people I trusted want me dead, so here I am." Bumpy sat down across from him. He studied the man who had electrified America, the man who had stood on stages and told black people to demand their freedom by any means necessary, the man who had made white America tremble and black America believe. And now that man was sitting in a restaurant, waiting for someone to put a bullet in his head. "Why did you come to me?" Bumpy asked. Malcolm smiled. It was a tired smile. "Because you are the only man in Harlem who does not answer to anyone. The nation cannot touch you. The police cannot control you. The politicians cannot buy you. You are free. And right now, I need someone who is free. What do you want? Protection? Not for me. I have made my peace with what is coming. But I have a wife. I have children. 4 daughters and another baby on the way. If something happens to me, they will have no one. The nation will make sure of that. I need to know they will be safe." Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. He had known Malcolm for years. Not well. They moved in different circles, Bumpy operated in the shadows. Malcolm operated in the light, but Bumpy had always respected him. Malcolm was the only man in Harlem who told the truth, even when the truth was dangerous. Especially when the truth was dangerous. "You have my word," Bumpy said finally. "Your family will be protected. No one will touch them. Not the nation. Not anyone." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. But I am not done," Bumpy continued. "You are going to let me protect you, too." Malcolm shook his head. "That is not necessary. I told you, I have accepted what is coming. I have not accepted it." Bumpy's voice was hard, sharp. "You think dying makes you a martyr? Dying makes you dead. Your children will grow up without a father. Your wife will raise them alone. Your movement will lose its voice. You want to change the world? Stay alive long enough to do it." Malcolm studied him. For a long time, neither man spoke. "Why do you care?" Malcolm asked. "You are a gangster, a criminal. What does my life matter to you?" Bumpy leaned forward. His eyes were cold. His voice was soft. "I am a gangster because America gave me no other choice. You think I wanted this life? I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor. But when I was 14 years old, a white man in South Carolina beat my mother because she would not step off the sidewalk fast enough. I watched him do it. And I could not do anything because if I raised my hand, they would have lynched me from the nearest tree." Bumpy paused. The memory was old, but the anger was fresh. "You stand on stages and tell our people to fight back, to demand respect, to refuse to be afraid. That is what I have been doing my whole life. The only difference is my stage is the street and my microphone is a gun. We are fighting the same war, Brother Malcolm. We are just using different weapons." The silence stretched between them. Then Malcolm reached across the table and extended his hand. "Then I accept your protection, Mr. Johnson. And I thank you." They shook hands. And in that moment, an alliance was formed that would last until the very end. For the next 6 months, Bumpy Johnson became Malcolm X's shadow. He assigned his best men to watch Malcolm's home. He had lookouts posted at every speaking engagement. He ran background checks on anyone who got too close. He turned Malcolm X into the most protected man in Harlem. But it was not enough. It could never be enough. The Nation of Islam was relentless. They were not just angry at Malcolm. They were terrified of him. Malcolm knew all their secrets. He knew about Elijah Muhammad's affairs. He knew about the money. He knew about the corruption. As long as Malcolm was alive, he was a threat. And the nation did not tolerate threats. The harassment started small. Phone calls in the middle of the night. Strangers following Betty, Malcolm's wife, when she went to the store. Cars parked outside their house at all hours. Then it escalated. February 14th, 1965. 1 week before the assassination. Someone firebombed Malcolm's house. His wife and 4 daughters were inside, sleeping. They barely escaped with their lives. Malcolm called Bumpy that night. His voice was different. The acceptance was gone, replaced by fury. "They tried to kill my children, Bumpy. My babies were sleeping in their beds and those cowards threw a bomb through the window." Bumpy was already moving, already calling his men, already planning. "Where are you?" "At a friend's house. Betty and the girls are safe. But this is it. They are done sending messages. They are coming for me. Then we end this first. We find out who ordered the bombing. We find out who is coming for you. And we deal with them before they deal with you." Bumpy spent the next week hunting. He called in every favor. He pressed every informant. He leaned on every contact he had inside the Nation of Islam. And slowly, the picture became clear. The hit was sanctioned from the top. Elijah Muhammad himself had given the order. The soldiers who would carry it out were from the Newark Mosque. 3 men. Names unknown. They were waiting for the right moment. A public event where Malcolm would be exposed. Vulnerable. Bumpy brought the information to Malcolm. "Cancel your speech at the Audubon. It is too dangerous, too open. Anyone could walk in there with a gun." Malcolm shook his head. "I cannot cancel. People are counting on me. My organization is counting on me. If I hide, they win. I will not give them that satisfaction. This is not about satisfaction. This is about survival." Malcolm looked at Bumpy with eyes that had seen too much, eyes that had already accepted what was coming. "I have been dead since the day I left the nation. Every day since then has been borrowed time. But I am not going to spend that time hiding. I am going to spend it fighting. If they want to kill me, they will have to do it in front of the world. And maybe, just maybe, my death will wake people up in a way my life never could." Bumpy wanted to argue. He wanted to shake Malcolm until he understood. But he saw the resolve in the man's eyes, the same resolve that had made Malcolm X the most dangerous voice in America. You could not argue with that kind of conviction. You could only stand beside it. "Then I will be there," Bumpy said. "My men will be there. We will do everything we can." "I know you will. And whatever happens, thank you. For everything." February 21st, 1965. The Audubon Ballroom. Malcolm X took the stage at 3:10 in the afternoon. The room was packed. 400 people waiting to hear him speak. Betty was there with the children. Security was tight, but not tight enough. Bumpy's men were posted at the doors in the crowd, watching for anything suspicious, but they were looking for guns. They were not looking for a distraction. At 3:15, a commotion erupted in the crowd. Two men started arguing, shouting, shoving. All eyes turned toward the disturbance. In that moment, 3 men in the front row stood up. The first shot hit Malcolm in the chest. He stumbled backward, his hands reaching for the podium. The second shot hit him in the shoulder. The third shot hit him in the face. Malcolm X fell. The room exploded into chaos, screaming, running, bodies crashing into each other. Bumpy's men tried to reach the shooters, but the crowd was too thick, the panic too complete. 2 of the shooters escaped in the chaos. One was caught by the crowd and beaten nearly to death before police arrived. By the time Bumpy got to the ballroom, Malcolm was already gone. Pronounced dead at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital at 3:30 p.m. He was 39 years old. Bumpy stood outside the hospital as the news spread across Harlem. He watched people weep in the streets. He watched the city that Malcolm had loved begin to mourn. And he felt something building inside him. Something cold. Something patient. Something that would not rest until the debt was paid. He had failed to protect Malcolm, but he would not fail to avenge him. The official investigation moved slowly. The NYPD arrested 3 men, Talmadge Hayer, Norman Butler, Thomas Johnson, all members of the Nation of Islam. The trial was a circus. The evidence was thin. But convictions came anyway. Life sentences for all 3. Justice, the newspapers said. Case closed. But Bumpy knew better. The 3 men who pulled the triggers were soldiers. Nobodies. The people who ordered the hit were still free, still powerful, still untouched. Bumpy began his own investigation. Quiet, patient, invisible. He spent months gathering information. He identified the Newark mosque captain who had selected the shooters. He identified the regional leader who had approved the mission. He traced the chain of command all the way to the top. But Bumpy did not want blood. Blood would start a war. Blood would bring attention. Blood would endanger the very family he had promised to protect. Instead, Bumpy chose a different kind of revenge: financial destruction. The Nation of Islam ran businesses across the country. Bakeries, restaurants, newspapers, farms, all of it funded by donations from the faithful and profits from the streets. Bumpy knew those streets better than anyone. Slowly, methodically, Bumpy began to strangle the nation's income in New York. Their newspaper distributors found their routes blocked by Bumpy's men. Their restaurants lost their suppliers. Their donation boxes disappeared from store counters across Harlem. Anyone who did business with the nation suddenly found themselves unable to do business at all. It was invisible warfare. No bodies, no bullets. Just a slow, quiet suffocation that drained the nation's resources month after month after month. Within 2 years, the Nation of Islam's New York operations were crippled. Membership plummeted. Revenue collapsed. The organization that had once dominated Black America was struggling to survive. Elijah Muhammad never knew who was responsible. He blamed FBI infiltration. He blamed internal corruption. He blamed everyone except the 60-year-old gangster in Harlem who had promised a dead man that he would make things right. Bumpy kept his promise to Malcolm in other ways, too. Betty Shabazz and her 6 daughters never wanted for anything. Money appeared when they needed it. Opportunities opened when they were ready. When the oldest girls went to college, their tuition was paid by anonymous donors. When Betty needed a new home, a real estate deal materialized out of nowhere. Bumpy never took credit, never asked for recognition. He simply kept his word, year after year, until the day he died. July 7, 1968, 3 years after Malcolm's assassination. Bumpy Johnson collapsed on a Harlem street, heart attack. He was 62 years old. They say that when the ambulance arrived, Bumpy was still conscious, still talking. A crowd had gathered. People who had known him for decades. People who owed him their lives. People who feared him. People who loved him. One of his oldest associates knelt beside him. "Bumpy, hold on. The ambulance is coming. You are going to be okay." Bumpy looked up at the Harlem sky. The same sky he had looked at for 40 years. The same streets he had walked since he was a young man with nothing but ambition and anger. "I kept my promises," Bumpy whispered. "All of them." Those were his last words. The funeral was the largest Harlem had ever seen. Thousands lined the streets. Politicians who had publicly condemned him stood beside gangsters who had privately feared him. Musicians played. Preachers spoke. And in the front row, sitting quietly, was Betty Shabazz and her daughters. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence said everything. After the service, a reporter approached Betty, asked her why she had come to the funeral of a known gangster. Betty looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "Mr. Johnson made a promise to my husband. He kept that promise long after anyone would have noticed if he had not. That is more than most people ever do. That is more than most people are capable of." She turned and walked away, and the reporter was left standing there, trying to understand the complicated truth of Bumpy Johnson. He was a criminal. That is undeniable. He ran numbers. He sold drugs. He ordered violence. He profited from the suffering of his own community. But he was also something else. He was a man who kept his word. A man who protected a revolutionary when everyone else abandoned him. A man who spent the last years of his life quietly caring for a widow and her children because he had promised a dead man he would. History does not know what to do with men like Bumpy Johnson. He does not fit neatly into categories, hero or villain, saint or sinner. The truth is more complicated. The truth is always more complicated. Malcolm X changed America with his words. He woke up a generation. He demanded justice. He refused to be silent. Bumpy Johnson changed nothing. He left no speeches. He wrote no books. He led no movements. But in the last months of Malcolm's life, when everyone else had abandoned him, Bumpy Johnson stood beside him. And in the years after Malcolm's death, when everyone else had moved on, Bumpy Johnson kept his promise. That is not redemption. That is not heroism. But it is something. It is loyalty in a world that rewards betrayal. It is honor among men who are supposed to have none. It is the complicated truth of two men who should have been enemies but became something closer to brothers. Malcolm X was buried in Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. Bumpy Johnson was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. They rest 15 miles apart. Two men who lived in different worlds but who understood each other in a way that most people never will. The gangster and the revolutionary. The protector and the prophet. The promise and the price, that is the story of Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X. Not the sanitized version, not the simplified version, the real version. The version where nothing is clean and no one is innocent, and the only thing that matters in the end is whether you kept your word. Bumpy Johnson kept his word, and Harlem has never forgotten.